The Wild West, an era of adventure and dusty saloons. Here, where every day was a challenge, food was more than sustenance. It was the fuel for those conquering the prairies. From steaks to cornmeal, these dishes were the foundation of life. Prepare to discover 25 foods served at Wild West saloons. Son of a gun stew. On the vast American frontier, this dish was both a mystery and a legend. Cowboys joked about it, but they always ate it. Born from necessity, son of a gun stew used every part of the animal: heart, liver, tripe, marrow, and even brain, simmered in a peppery broth with potatoes and onions. In cattle towns like Dodge City and Abilene, it wasn't just food, it was a test of grit. The real cowboy wasn't the fastest with a gun, but the one who could finish the bowl. Thick, spicy, and hearty. This stew was the frontier's answer to hunger and hardship, a meal of endurance, resourcefulness, and survival. Sourdough flapjacks. More than just pancakes, they were fuel for frontier heroes. Born from leftover sourdough starter, they became the perfect breakfast for gold miners and cowboys. Easily cooked over a fire, they sustained for the whole day. Golden, simple, they symbolized endurance. In saloons, served with syrup or wild honey, they offered a taste of home comfort amidst the rugged prairie. These flapjacks were more than just food. They were a source of strength and a reminder of home, far from it. Fried salt pork and beans. Out on the endless plains, when the nights bit cold and the wind howled through the sagebrush, a cowboy's best friend wasn't gold or whiskey. It was beans and salt pork. Simple, greasy, and hearty enough to fill a man after 16 hours in the saddle. The beans came dry and hard, soaked overnight in tin pots. The pork, thick and salty, cut from the barrel and fried until it hissed and smoked over open flame. Together, they made the music of the trail, the sizzle, the crackle, the smell that meant home, even in the middle of nowhere. Around that fire, stories were told, harmonicas played, and laughter rose with the smoke. It wasn't fancy food. It was survival food. But to those men of dust and distance, fried salt pork and beans was more than a meal. It was the taste of brotherhood, freedom, and the long road west. Chuckwagon coffee. In the saloons of the Wild West, coffee was more than just a drink. It was a morning ritual for survivors. After long nights on the trail or the open road, cowboys would step into the saloon where strong, smoky coffee simmered in heavy iron pots. Grit at the bottom, the aroma of burnt beans, and a trace of soot on the lips. That was the taste of freedom. Sometimes a drop of whiskey was added for warmth, or a pinch of salt, as the old chuckwagon cooks used to do. This drink united everyone, from the weary cowboy to the barkeep, because in every cup was the strength of the road and the life of the frontier. Rocky Mountain oysters. The Old West's most infamous delicacy. Dubbed prairie oysters, they're not seafood, but deep-fried bull testicles. A true treat after cattle roundups and brandings. Cowboys wasted nothing, not even parts most would rather forget. After castration, these organs were cleaned, sliced, battered in flour and spices, then fried in hot tallow. Saloons in Colorado, Wyoming, and Texas served them fresh, often during branding festivals. Eaten with hot sauce, vinegar, or mustard, or plain, chased with beer or rye. You ate them not to be fancy, but to show you were tough, local, and proud. Refusing a plate could get you laughed out of the bar. Rabbit stew. When beef was a luxury and food a necessity, rabbits answered the call. Light, lean, and plentiful on the plains, they became a favorite for chuckwagon cooks and saloon kitchens catering to working folk. This stew was simmered with whatever was on hand: potatoes, onions, carrots, perhaps turnips or wild herbs. The meat was first browned in pork fat or tallow, then slow-cooked until falling off the bone tender. It wasn't fancy, it was frontier rustic at its finest. In New Mexico and Arizona, rabbit stew was seasoned with chilies, cumin, and garlic, blending cowboy fare with nearby Mexican and native traditions. The result was hearty, warming, and surprisingly complex. Not a dish for outlaws or gamblers. This was for cowhands, weary of hardtack and beans, longing for a taste of a home they hadn't seen in years. Squirrel fricassee. Yes, squirrel. In frontier days, squirrel meat wasn't just accepted, it was expected. Cheap, abundant, and surprisingly flavorful, squirrel became a saloon staple in wooded areas from Missouri to Arkansas, especially when cattle was scarce. Fricassee, a method brought by European settlers, meant the squirrel was lightly pan-fried, then simmered in gravy, often made from drippings, flour, and milk. The result was tender meat in a creamy, peppery sauce, served over biscuits or cornbread. This dish wasn't advertised out front. You heard about it through the grapevine or from the barkeep. It was a local's meal, proof that saloons were community kitchens for those who knew how to make the most out of whatever moved in the trees. Corn Dodger biscuits. Cowboys didn't always have yeast, but they had cornmeal, and that was enough. These dense, hand-formed biscuits were made from cornmeal, boiling water, and salt, sometimes with bacon drippings or pork grease. Rolled into ovals or patties, they were fried, baked on rocks by the fire, or crisped in skillets. In saloons, they were elevated with a dollop of molasses or served alongside beans and stew. Their texture was gritty, the flavor smoky and slightly sweet, and they could last for days in a saddlebag without spoiling, making them trail-friendly. Wrapped in cloth, they were ready for reheating at dawn. To saloons, they were side staples. To cowboys, a reminder of home and hunger met with sheer grit. Pickled eggs. Seen in old-timey saloon movies, cloudy jars of pale eggs on dusty counters. That's no prop. Pickled eggs were a real cowboy snack, especially for those too broke or busy for a full plate. Saloons made them in large batches. Boiled eggs steeped in brine with vinegar, salt, mustard seed, peppercorns, garlic, and sometimes beet juice or chili peppers for color and kick. After days or weeks, they became sour, salty, spicy protein bombs. No fork needed. Grab, crack, and swallow. Sold for a few cents, served on the bar next to salt or hot sauce. Some paired them with beer or whiskey, an Old West happy hour combo. Today, they might seem an afterthought. But in 1870, on a trail halfway to nowhere, they were the closest thing to fast food. Hardtack and gravy. Nicknamed tooth breakers or molar chippers, hardtack was a survival biscuit of flour, water, and salt. Baked bone dry, often harder than the knife used to cut it, it was designed to last for years. But saloons knew how to soften the blow. They'd take chunks of hardtack, soak them in water or broth, and cover them in hot pan gravy, usually from salt pork drippings, flour, and pepper. Some added chopped onions or bacon for richness. To the cowboy, it was civility after a week of chewing bark. Not fancy, but warm, filling, and, once doused in gravy, even comforting. It tells the story of cowboy cuisine. Make do, don't waste, and never underestimate the power of good grease. Buffalo roast. Before cattle ruled the plains, buffalo was the heart of the frontier table. In early saloons and hunting camps, roasted bison was a feast for the strong, lean, dark, and rich, closer to venison than beef. Cooks basted it with salt, fat, and wild herbs, turning the open fire into a ritual of survival. The prized hump roast melted after hours of slow heat. Thin slices were served with gravy and potatoes, a symbol of victory and endurance. For a time, buffalo roast wasn't just food. It was power on a plate, and its taste echoed through the dying roar of the Great Plains. Biscuits and molasses. Simple, sweet, and soul-warming, biscuits and molasses were the humble comfort of the frontier. For cowboys worn down by dust and hunger, a hot biscuit and a drizzle of molasses meant relief. No sugar, no yeast, just flour, lard, and grit, baked in iron and served warm. Thick, dark syrup turned them into something more than food, a taste of home. When the night was long and the trail unforgiving, this simple pairing carried the memory of the South, of mothers' kitchens, and of gentler days long gone. Fried calf brains were a common delicacy in the Wild West, especially in budget-conscious saloons that wasted nothing. When a steer was butchered, its brains were cleaned, sliced, battered, and fried until crispy and golden. Often served with mustard, onions, or hot sauce, they were popular in towns influenced by German, French, or Mexican culture, where offal was more accepted. The texture was creamy inside and crunchy outside, with a mild flavor similar to eggs. Poor cowboys embraced this dish as fair game. Some saloons even served it with eggs and bread as a hearty frontier breakfast. What sounds unusual today was once smart cooking. Game jerky, smoked and dried strips of venison, elk, or antelope weren't just trail rations. They were saloon fare, brought in by hunters. This tough, chewy meat was cured with salt, smoke, and sun, often flavored with black pepper, chili, or herbs like sage and juniper. It never spoiled, required no heat, and perfectly complemented rye whiskey or beer. Some bars featured jerky plates, slices served alongside pickles or cheese. The original bar snack, preceding pretzels. The barkeep would wrap a bundle for light riders heading out. More than just sustenance, jerky symbolized self-reliance. You killed it, you cured it, you carried it. In the West, food earned respect based on the effort behind it. Miner's pot pie. In towns where mining and saloons intertwined, cooks needed something filling, affordable, and easy to batch prepare. Enter the miner's pot pie, the hearty meat in dough dish that foreshadowed later American comfort foods. Unlike today's creamy versions, this usually featured rough-cut beef, rabbit, or even squirrel, stewed with onions and root vegetables, then poured into a thick pan lined with pastry, if flour was plentiful. Some used biscuit dough atop instead of a true crust. These pot pies baked in communal ovens behind saloons or near blacksmith forges, sold by the slice or served in tin pans, often with pickles or leftover beans. For the average cowboy, it was the closest to a home-cooked meal. And with a bubbling, gravy-filled pie and a pint of beer, the dusty, dangerous world outside could wait. Cornmeal mush with tallow drizzle. Before grits filled southern tables, cornmeal mush was a true frontier comfort. Made from cornmeal simmered slowly in water or milk, it thickened into a hearty porridge, humble but sustaining. Once cooled, it was sliced and pan-fried to a golden crust. Some saloons sweetened it with molasses, but the rugged version came with a drizzle of hot beef tallow, seasoned with salt and pepper. Cheap, filling, and easy to make in bulk, cornmeal mush fueled cowboys, miners, and railmen alike. The poor man's polenta that kept the West moving. Wild turkey and dumplings. When a hunted wild turkey found its way into the pot, it signaled a feast on the frontier. For cowboys and hunters whose lives were spent under the open sky, the chance to prepare such a bird was a true bounty. The turkey was slow-cooked or stewed until tender in a flavorful broth, enriched with whatever root vegetables and herbs could be found. Then came the real magic. Simple, hearty dumplings, made from flour and water or milk, simmered directly in the broth, absorbing its essence. More than just a dish, it was a symbol of abundance amidst scarcity. A thick, warming stew with tender meat and soft dumplings. It offered strength, comfort, and a reminder of home, even when far from it. This was food prepared with care, shared amongst companions after a long day. Dried apple pie. In the harsh conditions of the frontier, where fresh fruit was a luxury, dried apples became gold. They were a primary store for winter or long journeys, preserving the taste of sun and summer. From them came the legendary dried apple pie, a symbol of home comfort and ingenuity. Dried apple slices were rehydrated, seasoned with spices like cinnamon or cloves, if available, and nestled into a crisp, homemade crust. Baked in a Dutch oven or a communal saloon oven, the aroma of fresh baking would waft through dusty streets. This pie was more than just a dessert. It was a true comfort, a taste of sweet, warm, and familiar far from home. For a cowboy or prospector, a slice of this pie was a reminder that even in the harshest conditions, sweetness and hope could be found. Fried corn cakes. On the frontier, where every grain of food mattered, fried corn cakes were a true lifesaver. Made from simple cornmeal mixed with water or milk, sometimes with an egg or even meat scraps for extra heartiness, these cakes were quickly pan-fried to a golden brown, often in the same fat used for previous dishes. They were versatile, serving as a sweet treat with honey or molasses, or as a hearty base for a meat stew. For hardworking cowboys and farmers, it was a fast, affordable, and incredibly filling way to refuel. Fried corn cakes embody the taste of simplicity, ingenuity, and the indomitable spirit of survival on the Wild West, a reminder that something truly valuable can be created from the humblest ingredients. Cow tongue in brown gravy. On the frontier, where every part of the hunt was valued, cow tongue became a dish that overcame reservations. It was a meal of resourcefulness, often made from scraps, transformed into a tender, flavorful treat. The tongue was slow-cooked or braised until exceptionally tender, making it pliable. It was then thinly sliced and served in a rich, savory brown gravy, often made from the meat's own broth, onions, and whatever seasonings could be gathered on the trail. Sometimes served with mashed potatoes or coarse bread to soak up the gravy, it was a dish requiring time and patience, but yielding a rewarding result. For those far from civilization, it was the taste of hearty, nourishing food, demonstrating how even the most unexpected ingredients could form the basis of a truly comforting dinner. Pinto bean chili. In the rugged lands of the frontier, where every ingredient was precious, pinto bean chili became a staple of the ration. More than just a dish, it was a vital energy source for those living and working far from civilization. Pinto beans, readily available and filling, were simmered with meat, often scraps, onions, spices like cumin and chili powder, and perhaps wild herbs found on the prairies. Slowly stewed to perfection, this aromatic concoction was ideal for cold nights around a campfire or hearty meals in saloons. Served in rough bowls, often with a chunk of stale bread to sop up every drop of the thick, spicy sauce. Pinto bean chili is the quintessence of Wild West sustenance. Simple yet nourishing, it fueled the fight against hardship and made the tough days a little warmer. Bread pudding with whiskey sauce. In days when fresh ingredients were scarce, stale bread transformed into a true dessert, bread pudding. This was a dish born of necessity and ingenuity, turning yesterday's leftovers into today's delight. Bread was soaked in milk or cream, mixed with eggs, sugar, if fortune allowed, and perhaps raisins or spices, then baked to a golden crust. But the real magic lay in the sauce. Whiskey, combined with sugar, butter, and spices, became a warm, aromatic drizzle generously poured over the hot pudding. This dessert was the epitome of frontier luxury, a comfort, a sweetness, and a touch of intoxication to lift spirits after a long, hard day. Fried trout with cornmeal crust. When a cowboy, days spent in the saddle, finally stopped by a stream, catching fresh trout was a true stroke of luck. The catch, taken from the wild, became the basis for a simple yet exquisite dinner. Coated in cornmeal for a crispy golden crust, the trout was fried over an open fire or in a camp's cast-iron skillet. The aroma of frying fish, mingling with the scent of smoke and prairie, was not just a call to eat, but a symbol of self-reliance and satisfaction. Served hot, with the slight crunch of the cornmeal crust and the tender flesh of the fish, it was more than just food. It was a reward for a long day, a taste of freedom and nature that made life on the frontier truly worthwhile. Gooseberry cobbler. On the remote frontiers, where gooseberries might grow wild or be cultivated with great effort, a cobbler made from these berries was a true delicacy. Often prepared by a woman working in a saloon or a ranch house, it offered cowboys solace and the taste of home cooking. Fresh or dried gooseberries, mixed with sugar, if available, became a sweet, tart filling, topped with a layer of biscuit-like dough. Baked in the saloon's oven or over a hearth, it filled the air with a sweet, fruity aroma. Served warm, often with a splash of whiskey sauce or cream, this cobbler was more than just dessert. It was a symbol of rare luxury, a reminder of home comforts in the rugged frontier world, and a coveted treat worth a long day in the saddle. Scrapple. On the edge of civilization, where every morsel was valued, scrapple represented a culinary marvel of resourcefulness. A dish often associated with farmsteads and humble homes, it also found its way onto saloon menus. Made from leftover meats, most commonly pork trimmings, mixed with cornmeal and spices, it was boiled into a thick porridge. Once cooled, the mixture set into a firm loaf, which was then sliced and fried to a golden, crispy crust. For cowboys arriving in town after weeks in the saddle, scrapple was a hearty and filling breakfast or supper, a familiar taste that evoked home or simply provided energy for the days ahead. It was a dish that spoke of thrift, of transforming humble ingredients into something nourishing and comforting in its own way, reflecting the spirit of survival and ingenuity on the Wild West. Across the vast Wild West, Humble ingredients became food for survival, from hearty chili to comforting scrapple. These simple yet carefully made meals, cooked by the campfire or in a saloon, became symbols of resilience, warmth, and the well-earned reward after long days in the saddle.